Hello and welcome. My name is Alan Mendenhall. I am editor and publisher of Southern Literary Review. I'm joined today by Annette Valentine, who is the author of Down to the Potter's House. And I believe the book released this month, correct?
That is correct. November the 7th. Yes.
November the 7th. And as we sit here today, I know this will run later, but it will run after this interview. But as we sit here today, it is November the 24th. So happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Annette,
happy Thanksgiving to you, Alan.
Yeah, it's so great to have you on here. Annette, the title to your book, Down to the Potter's House, it comes from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 18, verse 2. And I'm curious if you could explain the significance of that to your story.
Absolutely. Down to the Potter's House is saying to its readers that God will essentially direct your life if you let him. But if you want to resist and be the potter yourself, then it's a little bit hard to let him fix the cracks, remold you, reshape you. So it was based on that, loosely based on that, to say that the main character, who is Gracie Maxwell's life could be shaped, or she could go out on her own and see what she could do with it. And she chose the former.
Well, it's an inspirational novel, and it's the second in your My Father's series, and it involves, as you say, the 15-year-old character Gracie Maxwell, but then spans the years of 1921 to 1942. Paint us a picture of Gracie and small town Kentucky. She's based on your mother, correct?
Loosely based on my mother, yes. The story is about a young woman who has lost her mother at a very young age, and just how she's going to cope with life, but interject greed and hostility and really basically an evil quality in persons around her, and how that's going to shape her life, what she's going to do with that. So Gracie is like a lot of 15-year-old girls. She's pretty headstrong and has a mind of her own. But Gracie's a little bit different. She develops a power source that goes way deep. It's her faith, and it's how that begins to develop and not only make her just a typical strong person, but somebody who's willing to fight against evil and combat it in very unique ways. And come out on top and keep on climbing. So she was a climber, from the teenager that's depicted in the very beginning to the person who becomes an adult. It shows the strength of a person when they have a deep power source.
Well, I know your first novel was loosely based on your father, and now your second novel is loosely based on your mother. Family must be a very powerful force in both your personal life and your writing. Lots of people are interested in their family history and want to know more about it, but you'd almost take it a step farther by rendering it in fiction. And I find that to be fascinating. How did that come about? How did you decide to take that sort of next step?
Well, fictionalizing my family, you would think it could be a dangerous territory, but actually it's not. The first book that I wrote was a decade ago, and I gave it to an editor, and he said the first part of that whole book just simply needs to go away. And it was based on my father. So it was telling my father's early story, almost as if I wanted to tell the story of who he was and where his strength came from. But the editor didn't like that. I mean, not that he didn't like the story, but he didn't like including that in with the 1940s story that I was trying to tell in that original book. So Alan, what he said was basically all that needs to go away. And he said some things that really kind of touched a nerve, since I was telling the story of my family.
Yeah.
So if I might, I could go ahead and just say, he said that he thought Simon seemed like a jerk. And Alan, for someone to say, and I don't think the editor really realized it was based on my father. So for somebody to say, your father seems like a jerk,
Yeah.
that's just not allowed. And so
Yeah.
it became a defense of my father to find the man that really deserved my honor. And so it became a deep search for the man who did live in the 1920s and who he was all about and what his life could have been about. So that's kind of a long answer to a short question, but basically it became a deep search on my own to find my father. And so that's where the series came to be entitled My Father series, because Simon Hagen is loosely based on my father. Simon Hagen is carried through the 3 novels that are the trilogy, and the 3rd one comes out next year.
Isn't it interesting how some sort of criticism or some sort of comment can be such a driving impetus behind, you know, your work. I think that could be said for people who aren't just novelists, but all kinds of things. But it's just so interesting, just the small things that happen in life that really are what drives the completion of a great work, a great novel, and things like that. It's just interesting how personal experiences can shape an author. And I think the same could be said about the characters in your novel. So Gracie evolves as a person as the decades pass. I'm wondering if you could comment. You did comment a little bit earlier how she begins as this headstrong, typical teenage girl. But how does she evolve as a person?
She evolves very quickly into a dynamo, just because of, well, you were talking about catalysts and the things that happen that maybe force us into a direction that we hadn't planned. And I think you could look back on her life and say, really, it was the death of her mother that set her on a course of finding who she was in a world alone. Because without making any spoilers for the book, there was a character in there who would have altered her entire life if Gracie would have let her. And Gracie simply said no, kind of like I did with the editor with regard to my father. It's like, oh no, that is territory you will not touch. My father is thus and so. And I think Gracie, in her heart of hearts, simply said, oh no, you will not dominate my life to this one individual. You will not give me the direction that I'm going. I will have a different direction, and you will not get in my way. So I think it developed at 15 years old. Of course it matured, but she reared up very early, I would say.
Yeah, she sure did. There's an oft-quoted line by Maya Angelou that says that there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. And I seem to have read, or maybe I saw an interview with you where you said that at age 11, you knew you were going to be a writer, or you had determined that you were going to be a writer. There was some kind of epiphany, if I recall. And I'm wondering if over the years, your knowing that you were going to be a writer ever, that your own family's history ever occurred to you that would be the thing that would be what you were writing about. I know that the story's not purely about that, but whether you had ever made that connection, or if it just sort of, one day came to you that was going to be the story you were going to tell. How did that happen?
I know where you got that comment, and I did make it, and it is a true story.
Yeah.
When I was 11 years old, I stood in my garage, and out of the blue, I just said, one day I'm going to write a book. And then I said, okay, if I'm going to write a book, I better remember that I was 11 years old when I said that. But fast forward, I was an interior designer for 34 years, and I didn't do any kind of serious writing. I took journalism as an elective at Purdue, and actually published a story out of that. But beyond that, I mean, I really did not say I'm going to write these things. It was just a heartfelt expression in my off time, which I didn't have a lot as an interior designer and store owner, but it was a release. So writing was just kind of a offshoot of wanting to express myself. And then as the years rolled on, it began to develop. And then it's like, well, I do have stories to tell, and I do have a very fascinating family that I'd like to tell stories about. So it's funny. I didn't really, at 11 years old, and from that day forward, think, oh, I'm going to be a writer. I really didn't. I didn't even go that way in school. As I said, interior design was my thing. So creative. I mean, they're both very creative.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's interesting because creative design, I mean, it may not seem so obvious at first, but the creativity that you use for interior design, I mean, in some ways it could carry over into book writing. I mean,
there's
you're
absolutely
furnishing your story with particular characters and settings, and that seems to me a very interesting way of looking at the craft.
Yeah, they're absolute. Craft is the right word, because really you start with a vision in interior design. Same thing with a book. You've got to have, in writing, you've got to have the characters, and my stories are character driven. So yeah, very, very similar to interior design. You've got to have the bones, as we call it, to put the meat on, and then go from there. But yeah, creative through and through, but not a writer from 11 years old, even though I wrote things, but yeah, it wasn't my career direction.
You are a writer in the making.
I hope so.
And now you are a writer in its fullest form, right? Well, Annette, I would love to sit here and talk to you all day, because this has been so fun to do. But I'm told that viewers have short attention spans these days, and the interviews have to be cut off before 15 minutes. So I'm just following the experts' advice and having to cut us off. But I would love to do this again. And if I'm in the Nashville area, I'm going to look you up, and we'll have tea or coffee or something, because
She's my number. So yes, that'd be great, Alan. Thank you.
okay,
I
great.
really enjoyed talking with you.
Well, again, everyone, here is the book, Down to the Potter's House by Annette Valentine. You can find it pretty much anywhere books are sold, but you can also visit her website. And Annette, do you want to tell everyone what that website is?
Yes, it's Annette H. Don't forget the H, AnnetteHValentine.com.
Thank you so much, Annette. It's been really wonderful to have you, and hopefully we can do this again. Maybe when we get to the next on the series.
Absolutely. Check in again.